Hello, everybody. Today is September 19th, and we have a very special guest today. We have Mr. Brent Carson. He's a Delaware historian. I would assume that most people listening to this have either heard of him or met him before, but for those who haven't, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, and I'm a proud graduate of Hayes High School, so this is like coming back home. So, yeah, I was born here in Delaware, Ohio, back in many years ago, and graduated from Hayes as the member of the first class to go here all 4 years.
Wow.
And so, which was sort of exciting. I get together with some of my classmates. Some of them we get together once every 2 weeks, and then we have another group that gets together once a month, and we do that regularly, and then have your class reunions besides. But try to get up here to Hayes a lot for events, and including last Friday night's football game. That was exciting.
Yeah, that was a good game.
That was, and I felt special. I mean, the weather was great.
Oh, I agree.
And they had the Hall of Fame going on. So I was down there with them at the tent at the end of the field. And I've been to that event most every year down there. And of course, the problem is you can't see what's going on so much at the other end.
Yeah.
But that night, between the weather and there were all kind of touchdowns being right in front of me, and so I know we all had a good time down there last weekend.
It's definitely exciting.
Yeah.
What else do you want to know about me, or what should I?
So, you were a teacher in Delaware City Schools, weren't you?
Some of your teachers I had in class.
Really?
Yes, as my students. And yes, I taught at the Willis school, and I taught there in 6th grade history, social studies, for my whole career, and had a wonderful, fun career. It was, I know I heard you just say you were talking about maybe getting into some teaching history, and I recommend it. It's very gratifying, and I taught 6th grade social studies, and the other unusual thing about it is I taught in some of the same classrooms that my father and I that I attended when I was a student there, where my father had attended, where my grandfather had attended 100 years before.
Really?
That was at Willis?
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because the back portion of it on Winter Street is the original high school. And so that's where most of my years of teaching were, back on that part of the building.
So did you ever teach at Hayes?
No, I never taught at Hayes. I mean, occasionally particularly since I've retired, I get occasionally up here, like to Mr. Blackburn's history classes, do some project or just volunteering to come in a classroom, and then I remember coming up here too. They asked me to come up and talk about. Let me see. This would have been. I'm trying to think of what year I came up here to do this. It must have been in 1963. While I was going here to this school is when President Kennedy was assassinated. And that was quite a day in a classroom. Right down the hall here is where I was that day, the last period of the day. And never forgot that, because I can remember I was sitting at a table similar to this. There were 4 of us at the table when they came on the announcement and said it. And it was a Friday. There was going to be a big football game that night in Columbus, and they were having a car caravan of students go down to support Hayes. We had a big pep rally that day. Ohio State, Michigan were playing the next day. And so we just couldn't wait till the last 20 minutes of the day or whatever was about over. You know, the day is about over, the week's about over. And they came on with that announcement. And it is the only day in all my years as a student or as a teacher that I can recall walking out of a school and nobody talking. I mean, at the end of the day and on a weekend with all that, and I walked down this hallway right out here, and all you heard was lockers closing.
Yeah.
And some people rushing to get out of the building because no classrooms had TVs at that time.
Right.
And the only way you're going to see what's happening
Getting home.
is to get home quick.
Yeah.
And I do recall seeing a few students sitting on down on the hallway right out here, crying. And it's just so I came up here 50 years after that event on that day and spent the day here in classes in a room right down the hall here, talking about my memories of that day in this building on this hallway right here. And I'm giving you long answers for sorry.
No, it's a good thing.
That's kind of what we want. So,
But now, as you say it, I forget what the original question is, darn it.
I don't remember either.
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
neither do I.
But,
It's crazy.
Well, you were asking me if I ever taught here. That's
Right,
what it was.
that's
right.
That's
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
was the last thing you'd asked me there.
I remember when I went to Willis for fifth
Yes.
grade.
Yes.
You came and spoke to everyone.
Yes.
I think, I remember you shook my hand because it was like the fourth pass down from Abraham Lincoln.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that happened all as a result of where the front office is. Now today, that would be right there by the superintendent's office. You come up those steps. Before there was a school building there, that block had houses.
Really?
And the house that stood right about where the office stands, there was a man that I knew in this town who, when he was up in years, was telling me that when he was a little boy he lived in the house which is where the old gym at Willis stood. And he said, we used to play up and down that street. And up on the front porch of the house, which was right there about where the superintendent's office is, he said there was an old gentleman that would sit up there. He was an African American, and he would sit up there, and we would go up there and talk to him. He was a veteran of the Civil War, and he had served as one of President Lincoln's bodyguards. And every day when Lincoln came out, or the days when he came out to see them or to go somewhere in a carriage, he always he sat up and down and shook the hands of all the guards, and he would ask him this question: have you written your mother today? In a day when that's the only communication you had. And make sure that you're in the Civil War, you're in the Army, you need to keep contact with home. And he would shake our hand. And so this man that told me this said, so one day when we were talking to him, I said, may I shake your hand? Because that would only put me one handshake away from Abraham Lincoln. And so after talking to that man, I said, Wayne Gilbert, Wayne, may I shake your hand? That only puts me two handshakes away, you know. And so every year we would talk about, that subject would come up somehow in my class, and then I would often do what I did with you. I walked down and would shake people's hands to tell them how many handshakes away they were. I guess I would have been, Wayne would have been 2 handshakes, I would have been 3 handshakes, and you would be 4
I'd be
handshakes.
4, yeah.
But, yeah, that was what that was about. But, my word, it was, yeah, there's a lot of little things on history. You know that the old part of Delaware High School, as they called it, the part that faces Winter Street was built in the 1880s. And in 1910, the biggest school fight, as far as I know, ever took place regarding an issue was in 1910 or 11, because they'd had a fire in that building. It had destroyed the entire inside of the building. And so now the debate is, so what do we do next? And they eventually decided, well, we're going to rebuild. We're going to open that building up. And there was a lot of the students, a lot of them were really irate. They thought, you mean you're going to put, after that fire, you're going to redo it and put people inside those walls? And a lot of the adults the same way. Well, they did. They ended up opening it back up. 1928, it catches on fire again. Destroys the back part of that old building. There were students after school practicing a play inside there at the time. And they had to escape. And the stairways were blocked. They couldn't get out that way. They opened the window, and the fire department at that time, there was a church right beside it with a flat roof on the back. And they took a ladder, and ran it across the alley over that to that window and told the students, the only way for you to survive, you're going to have to crawl across that ladder up there from the second floor, crawl across to get to this roof over here. And they all did, but
That's crazy.
it is.
I didn't know that.
They opened it again. But then finally in 1932, they built a new one. I was at the board meeting last week, the Board of Education. And I was not there for anything having to do with that particular subject at all. But I heard it come up at the board meeting. But they're talking of redoing some of the inside of that old portion and putting in an elevator. Now, in 1910, 100 and over 10 years ago, they were arguing over whether or not they could save that building. Now they're talking of putting an elevator in there. So amazing what's happened. But how are we doing here?
I'm having a great time.
What else should I talk about, or would you like to talk about?
So, how early on did you know that you wanted to get into history and things like that?
Well, I always liked history, and when I went to college, I was not going to get into history. I was going to get into political science. My mother was a long-time teacher at Woodward School, and I had an aunt who was a long-time elementary teacher at a school called Boardman. And but I was interested in getting into politics, maybe, or into government, so I majored in political science. After graduating, I just couldn't decide what I wanted to do with that. And after 2 or 3 years after graduation, my parents were never, you're going to do this. But they were very supportive, and my mother did say, well, would you even think about maybe going into teaching? So I did, and I did. And I never regretted it. I mean, I made the right choice there.
That's good.
And because it was, and coming back home and teaching in the same place where I had attended was, I had to talk at graduation here a few years ago, and the second time I spoke at graduation, the title was, I am never coming back here again. And of course you would assume if you're at graduation, you're referring to students graduating, not coming back. And I told them that day, I said, it has nothing to do with you. I said, it's something that I said. And I said this back when not when I was teaching. I said it the very first day I ever walked into the Willis school building as a student. And I was the smallest kid in the entire school. And we, at that time, when you entered into the Willis building, you'd come from the elementaries. So you really didn't know a lot of the students who were there. That got you scared. We're going into a building with 6 grades in it, with all those big kids.
Oh, was the high school
Yes,
still?
the high school was
Wow.
still there. So we were sharing the hallways with the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. And here I was the smallest, shortest kid in the whole school. And then, for the first time, you switched classes. You went from room to room. You had a locker for the first time. And so there was a lot on your plate when you came in there like that. And then it got to the end of the day, and even though they practiced, I can remember walking into that homeroom, teacher's room that first day, and we handed you a card. And he said, "You're to fill this out." Or he said, you're to take this card, and on it is your locker combination. That's your locker number, your locker combination. You're to memorize your combination, remember where the locker is, and then discard of that card so that nobody sees it. So it's your combination. And I was thinking, even the day he gave it to us, I thought, and I'm expected to do this? Well, we tried it a couple times that day and never got in. Never got in my locker. Others were getting in theirs. And at the end of the day, still can't get in my locker. And I'm panicking because I lived outside of town. I had to take the bus to get home. And I was, of course, you can imagine as a kid, I am too proud to ask anybody around me, you know. They're getting their lockers and I can't get in mine. No, I'm not going to ask anybody. Everybody's leaving. Everybody had left. And the custodian had even turned the lights off in the hallway. And I'm still there trying to figure out how to work this combination. And finally, this teacher, Mrs. Schisler, walks down the hallway, and I thought, she comes over and says, "Having trouble, honey?" And I said, "Yes, I can't get in my locker." And she tried it, she couldn't get in. Took me to the office, combination was wrong. I mean, while I'm out by that locker, I had already determined what I'm going to do. But before she got there, I determined, I'd worked out the plan. I'm going to go home. I'm going to tell my parents very calmly that I am never stepping back into that school again. Well, then I got my locker and I decided, well, I'll try it a second day. But, so yes, I ended up back. But I had good years in school. Maybe not always grade-wise, but good years in school.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up in Delaware? Is it a lot different from now?
Yeah, there were a lot of differences. I mean, although I'm sure there were a lot of ways it's just the same, but I suppose some of the changes would be, well, I think of how many buses we have now. When I was in school in elementary and even all the way up through middle school, certainly, we had 3 bus drivers for the city. That's
Wow.
it. 3 school buses. But traffic wasn't as much. And so, I mean, there's all kind of reasons why that just wouldn't work today, you know. Not just because how many people, but it wouldn't work today that way. My gosh, some other changes. There was a time when everything you bought was downtown. I can recall going back to the time before a shopping center.
Mm-hmm.
You just didn't go to Columbus or to Polaris or someplace like that.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you wanted was going to be on the main street of town, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was part of your lifestyle there. And I think probably younger kids, one change is younger kids were much more likely to be given a freer rein in neighborhoods and on streets, in the sense that as a youth, for example, and I lived outside of town, just outside of town on a farm, but it wasn't unusual for friends and I to wander around and be gone 3-4 hours, and nobody's thinking anything about it. I mean, you're out playing somewhere.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and there's very good reasons why that couldn't have happened now, but that was certainly part of your lifestyle back then.
Yeah.
So, you grew up on a farm. Is
Yes.
that Carson Farms?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know of that, huh?
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
because that's all houses now.
Yes. I often think there's a street back in there called Hayfield Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, wow, how appropriate. I baled a lot of hay in that area right there.
Yeah.
That was my parents' farmland there. On the other side of the road is where then we had a house just a little closer there, almost, well, there's a traffic light after, just before you go into that retirement center called Willowbrook, or back to Schultz School. And we were right there is where our house and barns and cattle were, and where our miniature golf course was.
You had your own?
We had our own miniature golf course for
That's
our
cool.
farm, and it's my brother that talked my parents into building that. He was a few years older than I was, 4 years older. They were always big into mom and dad into sports too, and so we had what they called wiffle ball, which was a baseball with plastic bats, and
Yeah.
and we had a neighborhood of kids, and so we had one of them in our barn lot just near the house, and it was lighted at night, so we had lots of games at night out there. And we had croquet, an old game in our front yard, and we lit that croquet. We had a basketball court right behind the house, and it was lit at night. So, but then along comes my brother and his friends would drive to what is still there. The shopping center is called Graceland. It's on High Street, straight on down through Worthington, and on down a ways is Graceland. And he and his high school friends, when they were juniors and seniors, they would drive down there to play miniature golf because it was so popular back then. And they'd go down late, and so they would play miniature golf. Well, my brother kept talking to my dad and mom and said, we need one of these in Delaware. There's nothing like that around here. So he said, we have the land, we got the pasture field. So he talked my dad into building a miniature golf course in our cow pasture. And it became very popular for a number of years. I mean, it was and we had it for over 30 years. It was
Wow.
a long time. and just the family ran it for the most part. My mom, my dad, my brother, and I, and the cows. There was a creek on past the miniature golf course, and some nice shade trees right there. The cows would go from the other end all the way down through that field to that creek in the summer, and there's a path there that they'd follow. We built the golf course in the middle of the path. So the cows would come down and they had to change their route. We built fences, of course, around it.
Yeah.
And they would walk around it now and then down. And so it was quite a regular thing when you're out playing miniature golf for one of two things. Either the cattle are standing along the fence watching people play, or the people are standing along the fence on the other side watching the cattle.
Yeah.
But it was a good time. And
So
the ball would go out in the field, and they'd have to climb the fence. And it's just, it was such a different way of running that. And here's one, for example. Because we were on a farm and it's summer, you get busy. And so the golf course, say, opens mid-afternoon, or during the week, maybe 4 or 5. But there are days when we're still out in the fields farming, and there's no one to run the golf course. We had a very important sign that went on the counter of the clubhouse. It said, "Go ahead and start, be right back." The clubs are there, the balls are there, the scorecards and pencils are there. And when we said be right back, that might be 5 minutes. It might be 2 hours. And when we came back, cost of playing was 50 cents a game, stacks of quarters laid on the counter, and you just had to let it run itself.
Yeah.
And
I don't think you can do that
I
today.
don't think you could.
Yeah.
No, I don't think you could do that.
So how did it happen that it turned into like neighborhoods and stuff? Like, did someone like approach your family?
Yes. And of course, by the time my dad was retired, I mean, we had a dairy farm where we milked cows, which, by the way, is another place where they paid us. We're milking cows. They walk 100 yards out to the barn to pay us. But no, it got to the age where, when I started teaching, my dad switched. He knew that my brother had gone away, and I'm now teaching full time. And if you're a dairy farmer, you have to milk twice a day, milk those cows. Well, if there's only one person, and if anything happened, if you got sick, if you got hurt or something, who's going to do it? And so he switched from milking cows to buying cattle that you didn't have to milk. Had them for quite a while. In fact, actually, to the last week of his life, to the last day of his life, he had cattle. But we were already talking of maybe selling. There was a lot of people coming and wanting to buy the land because you're close to town.
Yeah.
And things were expanding. And so it never happened in his lifetime. It just barely missed it. And he was in the midst of thinking of selling that land when he passed away. And then, that's what happened. The developers came and wanted the land.
So around what year would that have been?
That was, let's see here, in 1996, around there, is when we began to, after my father passed away then. So
that doesn't seem that long ago.
No,
and now
it doesn't. No.
Now it's like a huge housing
that's
development.
true. Now it's sort of deceiving because there were 4 farms out on that road. The first one was the one where Sunnyview Farms is. And that was a pretty, real big piece of property, big farmer there. And then was our farm, and it was smaller. It was the area where you were referring to as Carson Farms. And then the next farm out, it's really not named, but it certainly is fully developed, is out to Houck Road. That was the third farm, and of course we were very close with those people who owned that, and it was a lot bigger than ours was. And then the next one on out is today Later Woods. And that was owned by a man that my dad actually farmed with, and it was much larger also. But it's sort of hard when you see that whole thing, and I think sometimes people think, well, Carson Farms must have been just huge. Well, it was actually 4 farms in there, and there was 3 other farmers that sold that land. But yeah, little by little kept growing, and so now it'd be sort of hard to believe for them to come back. Although I think my parents knew that it's going to happen. Eventually it's going to happen, but keep growing. But now, what house are you guys in?
I'm in Sugar Grove.
Sugar Grove. Okay.
Yeah. Ridge.
That's where my grandfather went to school.
Wow.
Ridge one-room school.
Yeah.
Way up by Randers. No longer there. But,
so when they named the 8 houses, like for our program,
Dr. Strand just came to me and asked me that if I could provide him with names of one-room schools around this county that once existed.
Okay.
And then from the list I gave him, that he and a couple other people on the staff chose the names of those actual schools.
Yeah.
Some are standing and some aren't.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember, I think everyone thought and still thinks that they're the 8 remaining in Delaware County.
No.
That's what me and Cooper Heald were talking about today.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Some are and some aren't.
Okay.
But there were over 200 one-room schools in this county.
Wow.
Yeah.
And many of them are standing, but they've been turned into houses.
Yeah.
We've done one-room school searches, and in fact, 2 or 3 years ago, we featured it at the fair, and our main photographer from our historical site and I drove that summer before the fair to get it all together. I drove, I think it was 380 miles and never left the county.
Wow.
All to every little corner and trying to find what's standing, what's not, pictures of them. Certainly the Houck Road is standing. Houck School is there. Yeah. But there are many of them still there. There's certain. My dad missed going to that Houck School by 1 year.
Yeah.
And his sister and older sister and brother went there, and he got to go out and visit it the year before, and he was hoping that he could go there, and he liked the teacher in this one-room school as a little kid, and they closed it that year, and they came to Delaware. But
So where did he go to school then?
he went then to, first school he went to then would have been what they called Boardman.
Boardman.
And now his school bus, he said, was a truck. And said they rode us in the back of this truck. And the truck hauled chickens in the morning. And then Well, I guess it dropped him off to school, and then it hauled chickens, and then it picked him up, take him home. And the girls complained in particular because he didn't really clean it out. So there's chicken manure, and they're sitting down and they get it on their clothes. And he said, and the other thing about this truck was it had some kind of a gear system that going up the William Street Hill, there by the campus of Ohio Wesleyan. So you go down, going back up, he had to back the truck up the hill and turn it and back it up with the kids in there.
Yeah.
Now, can you imagine today in the traffic?
Yeah, you couldn't do that.
I think we're going to back up this hill.
In a chicken truck.
Yeah, in a chicken truck. And, but they didn't have school buses yet, he said at that point.
It's funny.
So were how did it work with the one-room buildings? Were they like, kind of like together, like how like a district would be, like how like Schultz, Woodward?
Well, they, every school was independent, but they, by law, they had to have so many. Yeah, I know they used to talk about, oh, they walk forever to get to this school. We had to walk to get to, well, some had to walk quite a ways, but the farthest they would ever have to walk would be at least no more than 2 miles, because you had to have so many, and they had to be spaced out.
Yeah. And
so it wasn't as far, but not far enough. I mean, if you're talking 2 miles in the winter and through they don't clean the roads and that type of thing, and so it was a challenge. But when I was at Willis, we had an after school that I put together history club. It's called the Willis History Club, but it was not to study world history or what's going on out in the world. Study Delaware history and Willis history and Delaware County history and try to preserve it. And so we did one contest where it was a 2-year contest. They could organize in teams of 2. We ran it right through the summer. And you got, I think the prize was $200 for finding out the most information you can find about one-room schools in this county. And you got points for such things as if you can find a teacher of a one-room school, and if you can put together a gathering of former students in a one-room school. The more you did, the more you got. If you would interview one-room school students and bring back the interview, and it went on for 2 years, so we got a lot of information. And we actually put together reunions of one-room schools. Like at Houck Road, the last living teacher was living in Sudbury, Ohio, and we brought her over with about 8 of her former students from that last year when she had it, and she had not seen all but one of them since she had for over 60 years.
Wow.
And they had a little reunion right there in front of the Houck School, and they brought her over for that. But so yeah, that was quite an era when they had the one-room schools. We found all kind of incidents that happened at them, and you had major school arguments and fights when people were told that you're no longer going to be going to a one-room school, you're going to go to a consolidated school with more students. I mean, when Ostrander area, there was a school out there, they said they're going to go to this big school in Ostrander. They said, no, we're not. We want to stay here. And it got to the point they had an incident out there where somebody burnt the one-room school down because some of them wanted to go and some didn't.
Wow.
They burnt the school down in the night, during the night.
Yeah.
And there was one family that was very much wanted to go there, and the other family down the road, they didn't want to go there, and they blamed that other family for the burning of that. And they had 2 sons, one family with the other, of high school age at one point, and they were not speaking again. These 2 families, no, 2 boys became best friends, and they had no problem. And finally, these 2 boys were out driving one night. They had a car accident, and one of the 2 was killed. And so at the funeral, the other family came, and they decided to make up. They thought, this is it, we shouldn't be arguing over such a thing after that. And they got back together. But, yeah, just all kind of incidents that happen at some of these. But
so you brought up the Delaware Historical Society.
Yes.
When did you become a member of that?
I became a member probably in the early 1970s, but until I retired from teaching, I really loved teaching. But in 2005, I decided that it's time to retire, not because I didn't like teaching, but because Delaware County was about to celebrate its 200th year. Bicentennial. And that's going to be a major celebration. And I wanted to be a part of it. And I knew there's going to be a lot of planning. And I wanted to be a part of that. And I had other thoughts of things around the county I wanted to get involved with preserving. And I thought, if I continue teaching as much as I like it, I'll never get to it. And so I retired to do more with, but I always stayed close to the Historical Society, and then became president of it, and have just stayed active with it now. Now a lot of my former teachers that I taught with, as they retire, I've grabbed them into the Historical Society, and we have a good time just getting together, but also a lot of projects, lots of students. But
so what are some of the tasks that you take on?
Oh my gosh. Last spring, from March to June, we saw 2,400 students from all over the county. We do anything from tours to, we have planned activities that we take to the schools. One of the tours that I've given that's my part in the tour. It usually takes about 10 or 12 of us to be involved in the whole tour process, but I go down to the spring at Ohio Wesleyan University. And that old sulfur spring, I'll bring 3rd graders down there, and from down at the Liberty High School elementaries and Orange and Berlin and all over the county. It's such a great spot there across from their football stadium in that campus green area, because where that spring is where the town started. And we talk about, why does a town start where it does? Why here? You're in a wilderness of trees everywhere when the first people came in here to settle. And they could have started it anywhere. Have to be some reasons why, and one was that spring. So I take them down there and tell them all about how it all started, and so we do those. We do reenacting. We reenact characters. There's always something going on. We have a lot of good volunteers. We even have a few high school and university volunteers that participate with us. And
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So.
Do you plan on visiting the Little Brown Jug this year or anything? At the
I almost
Delaware
always
Fair?
go to the Little Brown Jug. I should mention this one year that I was part of the all-horse parade here just recently. And, yeah, and the man who calls the Little Brown Jug has been calling it now for 55 years.
Wow.
His name's Roger Houston. His nickname in harness racing is The Voice, nationally known as The Voice. He has traveled the world to call races, and has called over 230,000, I think it's over 230,000 races. And he's been here, and he's turned 80 this week.
Wow. It's perfect.
One of your art classes made a big birthday card for him, being Pacers, talking about racing. So yes, it's been a big event over the years.
When did the Little Brown Jug start?
1946.
Okay.
The first winner was a Delaware person.
Oh wow.
And that's the only time a Delaware person won the little. I think only time a Delaware person won the Little Brown Jug.
When did it become? Because I know it's a big deal,
Yes.
right? When did that? Was it always a big deal?
There had been harness racing before the Little Brown Jug, and the harness racing world, just like in the thoroughbred racing world, had the Triple Crown of harness racing, just like there is the Kentucky Derby and so forth. And so they were looking for a major racetrack or major race to be placed at a racetrack, and they offered it to Delaware. And there's already a fair here, already had been some harness racing, so they had to get together a meeting about it. And they said, if you do not wish to accept this, let us know by a certain date. And they had a meeting. They decided, we are not going to hold this race. They said, this town cannot support that many thousands of people coming in here for something like that. And so they had charged one person in their group of people deciding, write them the letter, tell them that thanks, but no thanks, we just can't do it. And later he claimed he forgot to write that letter. And the next thing you knew, the National Harness Racing Association said, congratulations, you are now the recipient of this race. And it hadn't been named yet. They had a contest. Somebody won the contest by naming it Little Brown Jug. And it took off from there. But
yeah. I'm glad it did.
Yes.
Joe, I think you were telling me this morning that that's where Delaware gets most of its money for the year. Is the
well, they certainly get a lot. I'm sure from that. But I can tell you that when I was teaching, every year on the Wednesday before you get out for those 2 days, for the jug, I had every year for 6th graders what we called Delaware Week. And we always centered it around the week before the fair. And so every day I'd do a big assembly in the auditorium for all the 300 6th graders or however many, and the teachers. And the week was dedicated to a program a day on something about Delaware County. And Wednesdays was always on the fair and the Little Brown Jug. And I got to talking. I got a hold of Roger Houston. Managed to track him down, and he agreed to come. And he came to that assembly. I think he told me here this last week when it was when we were in the horse parade. He said, I said, I think you came about 5 times. He said, oh no, I think I came 8 times to your school. And he was so good with the kids. And he would actually choose students in the audience and get their name, their first name, and then he would call a race. just like he was on the racetrack with those students' names. And coming around the back stretch, and here they come. And in fact, he also, we had a professional movie we showed on harness racing that was featured around the jug. And the first time that I had him come, maybe the second time, at first the students didn't know he's there. We're showing the movie, and this famous voice, this unusual voice, is calling the race. And then I said, Roger, what about doing this? We'll put you backstage there, because we had that big screen in the auditorium. Put you just off the side right there, where you can watch the race from the side, but they don't see you. The students don't see you. And we'll be watching that race in this film, and then all of a sudden I said, and then I'll have them turn it down, and you call the rest of that race. Live in person right here. And he came out, the kids went nuts when I said he's actually here today. And then every year, a lot of years too, I bring in some of the well-known race drivers would come in and talk, and but it was a lot of fun.
I don't think a lot of students here at Hayes know how big of a deal the Little Brown Jug is.
Of course, they would. Yeah.
So Rutherford B. Hayes' 200th birthday is coming up soon.
Yes,
is there anything at the Historical Society that you guys are doing?
Oh my! We've had a committee that has Historical Society is also a part of it. Some of our members are, but it's actually been a committee that's worked separately. That's the group that got the statue down in the corner, and then knowing that the 200th was coming up, we started planning for what are we going to do for the 200th. And so yes, there will be a morning commemoration down at the statue, and also by the birthplace house, by the place where he was born anyway. And then in the evening, well, there will be activities going on in Ohio Westland regarding it also. Then in the evening, we will have here in the back stretch, in your dining room there, a banquet, a big dinner, a formal dinner in honor of President Hayes, and $50 a seat. But that will go for a scholarship to a Hayes student.
Okay.
And every year we hope to, in honor of President Hayes, pick a Hayes student to give them a scholarship of some kind, and that money will be going to that. After the dinner, at about 7 o'clock on Tuesday, October 4th, there will be an assembly. There will be in the auditorium a program on President Hayes to wrap up that day on his birthday. And we have found out that there is just learned in the last month. We'd already been planning what we're going to do during that program. Then we get the call from a reenactor, person who actually goes out and reenacts President Hayes. And he called us. And although he charges for this, he said, no, I don't want to charge for this day. He said, I want to come to Delaware, Ohio and reenact him at his birthplace on his birthday.
Yeah.
And so we're having him in the auditorium. And he will sit on the stage with former Hayes teacher, who's the chair of our committee, Bill Reitz, and they'll have a conversation. And the conversation will be about President Hayes on his whole life, including he'll talk about Delaware, Ohio, and what part Delaware, Ohio played in his life. And it's free. That part of it is free. You don't need a ticket. You just need to show up at that auditorium there on October 4th, Tuesday, at around 7:30, and be there. But so that'll be the big day. And then I'm on the committee also up at Fremont, Ohio, where the Presidential Center is. as they are celebrating President Hayes's, because that's where he lived most of his life.
Yeah.
And that's where the Presidential Center is. So I'm on their committee as they plan to celebrate all year long.
Wow.
But they've agreed. So I've talked with them and all. They said, oh, yes, we're not going to do anything on the 4th, on his birthday. That's your day. And they said, we will, in fact, they'll send some people down to be here for our event. And then they have events planned all year long. But so yes, it'll be a big day for this town.
And that's in 2 weeks from tomorrow,
Yes,
right?
October 4th.
Yep.
On a Tuesday. Yes.
I'm bummed. I just looked. We have an away soccer game.
Oh,
that
really?
day.
Oh, do you? Uh-huh.
Yeah, we play at Whetstone.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
It's in Columbus. So, when you went to Willis
Yes.
and like Delaware schools and stuff, was there still a rivalry back then with like Buckeye Valley, or is
there were
that?
rivalries. Yeah, I was at the very first. You know, I have been to every homecoming at the high school here, except one. And the only one I missed, I was only 4 weeks old. But the next year, my parents always liked to come to homecoming. And so they would always bring me. And then as I got into school, I got into going to the homecoming. And even when I went away for college, I would come back for homecoming. Even though I was away from Delaware, I'd come back every year for homecoming. And so yeah, there were rivalries on my Buckeye Valley. Yes, in football, the very first time that they played, I will never forget that night. It was at not this football field here, it was where Delaware played. School had opened, but there was no football field here yet. They played at the old community field where today the soccer stadium at Westland is.
Okay.
Roy Reich over there.
Yeah.
And played Buckeye Valley, and of course, Buckeye Valley wasn't a very big school. Delaware's going to beat the heck out of them. No. Delaware got beat that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was the shocker, you know. First game ever, and here they beat us. And a popular place after ball games back then was the old restaurant, the Hamburger Inn. And we decided to go down, and my parents and I, and it was we knew it was going to be a rough time in there because you're going to have a lot of the Buckeye Valley. They're going to be in there that night, and they were, and we were. But yeah, that was a rival. The other big rivalry in league play was always the old Orange and Black against
Mount
the old
Vernon.
Orange and Black. You know which school that would be?
Mount Vernon.
That would be Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
Oh my word. The biggest fight I ever saw in a basketball game was in Mount Vernon back in about 1959 or 60. But yeah, they were always the big rival. And now, when I was teaching one time in the summer, or maybe late summer, I'm out by the freeway and there's the pancake place, the Waffle House.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm out there eating one day, and there's a couple, 3 or 4 people sitting there in a booth. I'm at the counter, and I just happen to overhear them. And they're talking about sports in high school, and they are saying, yeah, and Delaware, and somehow they got off onto Delaware and Mount Vernon. Well, these were Mount Vernon people. And one of them made the comment to one of them that Delaware doesn't support their sports like Mount Vernon does. And I didn't say anything to him, but it sort of that didn't set well with me. I didn't say anything to them, but I was teaching them the next winter for basketball, and I decided, well, I'm going to do what I did for football. for my students, I would give my students extra credit if they would go to homecoming. They'd get a 1A for being there and 1 extra A if they got their picture taken with the homecoming queen. And they got a free hot dog. I buy them their hot dog. And so I thought, I'm going to do that for that Mount Vernon basketball game this year, the home game, of course. And so I offered the students the same thing, get an extra A if you go, and I will buy you a hot dog for anybody who will go. And I decided I would open this up to the whole school. So if they weren't in my class, they didn't get the extra A, but they got the hot dog. And so we kept pushing this. And then I thought to do it with Dempsey also for the 7th and 8th graders. And that thing took off. And I asked the people at Dempsey, and I asked the teachers at Willis also, we need just a rough count of how many are coming. So I got the count from I said, and the way they decided we'll do it is, I said, why don't you just have them write down, take a hand count, how many are going to go, write down that number, put it on outside your door for them to pick up after attendance, and then turn that in to me, so I'll know. And they said when I went to get that later in the day, they said you realize how many this is? I said, we're getting between 10 and 15 people per class. At Dempsey. And we're getting the same at Willis. And I'd already worked it out with the boosters. And at the school, I said, I think we're gonna have a crowd tonight. And so they said, well, we'll cover it for your hot dogs. And they gave me a little bit discount on the hot dogs, but I said, and if the kid would buy a ticket, they get the hot dog and all that. And it was the biggest crowd Hayes ever had in that gym. In fact, they had to announce more than once, would everyone please scoot a little closer? We have people still trying to get in. They set up chairs down at the one end of the gym off the court there for some extra room. And it was packed. And 6th graders, they go to the game and they're there, but a lot of them like to get up and walk. Yeah. They sit down and a while, now they're out the door. And there's a constant stream during the game, back and forth. And I can recall once this girl was walking down there with a couple others, and because they're walking beside each other, one of them's out on the court. They're playing. She's out on the court, and they're coming to the court, and the referee and watching the game ran into her. And she looks at him, what are you doing? like, what? You ran right into me, she's saying to the referee. And they had to then make an announcement, to please students stay off the court when the ball game is going on. But it ended up good. It was.
How many hot dogs did you end up buying?
Oh, hundreds. I don't remember now, but we did that twice over the years. But that was the biggest one right there.
Did we win that game?
We did win that game. Yes, we did.
Nice.
And then, of course, what drew the extra crowd though was, of course, 7th and 8th. By the time you're in 7th, 8th grade, you don't need your parents. But 5th and 6th graders, oftentimes they'd never even been at Hayes, and so the parents would go with them. So that built the crowd too, because they were there to see the game, and if not, pick you up afterwards. And wouldn't you know, everybody's gone except myself and one little 5th grader who's waiting for her parents to pick her up. Everybody's left. I'm standing out there by the Pacer doors, just inside there, and they didn't come, and they didn't come, and there was nowhere to call, and I finally said, could I take you home? And she said, well, I don't know for sure how to get home. She said, we only moved here. She was a new student. We've only been here about a week. And she said, and I ride the bus. I said, well, if I took you down to Willis, where you leave the bus after school, do you think you could remember from there? And she said, I'm not sure. So I had to wait until they arrived. And, but anyway, you keep going, you're fine.
I was just going to say, when you're with the basketball story, yep. I'm envisioning that was in like what now is like the Aux gym, right?
No, that was in, that's, no, it was in the gym where you are now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was in there.
So how long ago was that?
Well, I'm going to say, and I have all that written down at home, I did a little writing on it to record all that, and I think it was around 2001 or 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Something like that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, since you've like grown up here, there's been a lot of like growth and stuff. Like it's very like different. Where do you see like Delaware City Schools like going as far as like expanding and stuff like that?
My
like,
word, it's hard to imagine. I mean, they've done such a good job of making use of schools and adding on, saving people money that way, you know, of not having to build. But I can't imagine at some point that they're not going to have to do some building. And where, I don't know. That's those are hard things to come up with. And it's just like Willis. They've done such a wonderful job in maintaining that. I mean, it's the home of the United Way now. It's administration building. Special Olympics, that's their home, that gym down there.
Oh, really?
And now they've been working on taking good care of the auditorium down there. So and I think there's even a few students from the high school that meet in the back part of that old building in a class. I can't remember what it is.
I think I remember hearing something about that. Yeah.
So they made good use of what they have there, and I think that's the great thing about the city schools. And I know you have such a principal with a great reputation. I mean, Principal of the Year last year in Ohio.
I didn't
know that. Wow.
Yeah, he's very modest. He doesn't, but he is. And I give lots of tours here at Hayes and class reunions. I will admit there are just in these 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks right here. A lot of them now started coming back during fair time. And then they hold their class reunion, their get-togethers. And I think there are 9 going on within these 3 weeks. And I had a tour in here just over the weekend with a high school class that was here.
So do they give tours of Willis too?
Yes, I have a class tour coming up there, not before very long. In fact, way back in the day when I was teaching there too, of course you had many more of the older classes still wanting Willis, you know, because that's where they had graduated. And it got to the point where, since I more or less was called the school historian, I would have teachers had to turn their keys in at the end of the school year, you know, and then pick them up on that first day. Well, the principal, the vice principal, the custodian, and I were the only ones who had a key all year round to the whole building. And that was because I got so many requests over the summer on the evenings for tours of the old building and down there. But we had one time we had, for our history club, we had a door counting contest for the school. You got a prize for naming the most, or naming the door, how many doors there are on this building, and the person with the closest number without going over the number was the winner. And we had somebody come up within less than 5 doors. They got it.
Wow.
Because I'm talking any door that opened on a hinge. Not just the doors on the outside. Locker doors, small cabinet doors. Willis has an attic. Willis has some rooms under the building. And they have a room under the stage down there. And I had never been in some of those areas. And to get that, I met with the superintendent and the buildings and grounds person, the principal, and one other person. I remember we got to take the tour of the entire building. That was sort of cool, going up into the attic and going down to those crawl spaces under the building so that we could count what doors no student would ever see, and we gave them that count, and then they had to count the rest, and it ended up being something like 2,200 and something. That they.
I bet there's more wheels.
More what?
More wheels. It was like an internet trend last year about whether there's more doors or wheels in the world. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Did you have anything else you want to talk about or any questions for us?
I probably talked to you longer than you ever. I can't think of anything.
That's offhand. Yeah.
You're very kind to ask even to be here.
Thank you for coming
Yeah,
on.
I had a good time listening.
When we were planning this podcast over the summer, and part of last school year, you were one of the first people we thought of.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, that's kind.
But, thought you'd be great to come on. And
well, I appreciate it, and I love Hayes, and love being around your activities too. So
yeah. Wow. You good?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.